The Little Match Girl. Once upon a time, in a cold and snowy city, there lived a little girl. She was a poor little girl, and she didn't have warm clothes or shoes. She walked through the snowy streets, shivering from the cold. In her small hands, she carried a bundle of matches. She hoped to sell them to people passing by. "Matches, matches for sale," she called out softly, but no one stopped to buy. It was New Year's Eve, and everyone was busy with their families, preparing for the festivities. The little girl was so cold that she could hardly move her fingers. The snowflakes danced around her, and she tried to find a place to stay warm. She found a little corner between two houses and sat down. She pulled her thin, ragged dress closer, trying to keep warm. She looked at the matches in her hands and thought, "If I light one, maybe it will warm me up." She took one match and struck it against the wall. The match burst into a small flame, and the girl held it close to her. It was like a tiny candle, and it made her feel a little warmer. As she looked into the flame, something magical happened. She saw a beautiful stove in front of her, with a fire blazing inside. She stretched out her hands towards the stove, feeling its warmth. But then the match went out and the stove disappeared. She was alone in the cold once more. The little girl lit another match. This time she saw a big, beautiful table filled with delicious food. There were roasted meats, fresh bread, and tasty cakes. Her mouth watered, and she reached out to take a piece of bread. But just as she touched it, the match went out, and the table vanished. The girl struck another match. This time, she saw a big Christmas tree, sparkling with lights and ornaments. There were toys and presents all around it. She was filled with joy and excitement. She reached out to touch one of the ornaments, but again, the match went out, and the tree disappeared. She lit another match, and this time, she saw her dear grandmother. Her grandmother was the only person who had ever been kind to her, and she loved her very much. Her grandmother smiled at her warmly, and the girl felt so happy and safe. "Grandmother, please don't leave me," she cried. She quickly struck another match, hoping to keep her grandmother with her. The flame grew brighter, and her grandmother looked more real. The little girl lit match after match, trying to hold on to the vision of her grandmother. The night grew colder and darker, but she didn't feel it. She was lost in the warmth and love of her grandmother's presence. Soon, the whole bundle of matches was gone, and the little girl closed her eyes with a smile on her face. When the sun rose the next morning, the people in the city found the little girl. She was lying in the corner between the houses, with a peaceful smile on her face. In her hands were the burnt-out matches. They saw her and felt sad that she had no one to care for her. But what they didn't know was that she had gone to a place where she was no longer cold or hungry. She had gone to a place where she was warm and happy, with her grandmother by her side. The people who found her began to talk among themselves, feeling the sorrow of her loss. "What a sad thing to happen on New Year's Eve," one woman said, wiping away a tear. She was so young, and she had no one. Another man, dressed in a thick coat and hat, looked at the little girl and sighed. "How could we have been so busy with our own lives that we didn't see her need? We must do better to help those who are less fortunate." The people in the city decided to honor the little girl by making sure that no one would ever be as cold and hungry as she was. They started to collect warm clothes and food for those in need. They remembered the little girl's sad story and wanted to make sure it never happened again. As the years went by, the city changed. People became kinder and more generous. Every New Year's Eve, they would gather in the town square and light candles in memory of the little match girl. They told her story to their children and their grandchildren, so everyone would remember the importance of kindness and compassion. One little boy, listening to the story for the first time, asked his mother, "Why didn't anyone help the little girl when she was alive?" His mother hugged him close and said, "Sometimes people forget to look around and see who needs help. We must always remember to be kind and look out for each other." The boy nodded and decided that he would always help those in need. He made a promise to himself to be like the little match girl's grandmother, kind and loving. He knew that even a small act of kindness could make a big difference. Years later, the boy grew up to be a kind man who helped many people. He often thought of the little match girl and her grandmother. He remembered the story and the lessons it taught him. He knew that the little girl had found peace and happiness with her grandmother, and it made him smile. One snowy evening, as he walked through the town, he saw a little girl selling matches. She reminded him so much of the little match girl from the story. He stopped and bought all her matches, then took her to a warm place to eat and rest. He knew that by helping her, he was keeping the spirit of the little match girl alive. The town continued to thrive, with people always looking out for one another. The story of the little match girl had changed them all. It reminded them that no one should be left out in the cold and that everyone deserved love and care. Moral of the story: we learn from this story that kindness and love are very important. We should always try to help those who are in need and show them kindness. The little girl didn't have anyone to care for her, but in her heart, she found warmth and love. Let us always remember to be kind to others and to share our warmth and love with those who need it most. By doing this, we can make the world a better place for everyone.